Welcome to episode 12 of Talk to Your Meeting Doctors. Grab a cup of coffee and join Martin Duffy and me, Paul Nunesdea, as we take a relaxed but insightful look back at 2024. In this episode, we reflect on our achievements, share lessons learned, and set the stage for future discussions on effective meeting management. Stay tuned for practical insights, thought-provoking reflections, and an exciting plan to create a playlist of episode summaries for quick and actionable takeaways. Let's make your meetings more effective and impactful in 2025.
Well, 2024. Wow, what a year, right?
What a year. We had some amazing conversations. It was really interesting, Paul, that we started our year slightly differently to what we had previously done. Two things I think stood out a little bit. Previously, we didn't really do back-to-back meetings with the same participants. And that was a little bit of a shift in 24, which we started doing and worked out really well. Actually, we started that at the very beginning of the year with Eric de Groot on meeting design. And from our last meeting with Eric in 2003, we felt there was much more to talk about. So that was really interesting. The other thing I suppose we did in 24 that was slightly different, in the latter part, we wanted to focus on the experience of CEOs, COOs, the senior leadership teams. So rather than speaking to meeting experts, we said, well, let's go to the actual people who host and run and manage their meetings and see what their feedback was. And that brought us into a really interesting year end with our discussions with Ruth, which we might talk about a little bit later. And we'll talk about into the beginning of 2025. Yeah, so a really interesting year, Paul.
Absolutely, Martin. And now that we are doing our private conversation public with this recording, because it's such a great pleasure, Martin, that I have your involvement in this episodes series, and the time you dedicate to this is really a gift for me. So I'm thankful to you on that regard. And I hope that our viewers also benefit from our relationship here, our virtual relationship, because actually Martin and I, we never physically met. That's amazing. And we start this series since the pandemic. I remember I was still in Madrid. I have the first episodes. My background was different. You had a beer.
Yes, right. Yes, yeah. My grandchildren persuaded me to get rid of the beard, Paul.
Yeah. It was quite epic those times and those days. And still, Martin, what I realize is that no matter how much we try to evangelize the world on the importance of effective meetings and how meetings can impact organizational productive overall, there's still this huge gap of ignorance. Huge ocean of ignorance, and even I would say malpractices, because or I'm not sure that these are intentional malpractices, but the lack of knowledge creates that kind of bad meetings and bad meeting experience. And then everybody says, oh, looking at the watch, when is the break?
Yeah, absolutely. But we touched on that theme. That came up a couple of times with various parts of our conversations, Paul. I'm thinking back to one of our conversations with Joe Allen. And Joe is obviously one of the world leading experts in the study of meetings and meeting science. But I suppose a key question that Joe provoked, two key points that Joe provoked with us. One was, if we haven't got clarity as to why people are meeting, then we significantly increase the risk of meeting bad practice. Because if we're not focused on why we're there, we're immediately going to waste people's time, and we're very likely going to, I suppose, annoy people because we're wasting their time. So that was one major takeaway from our conversation, one of our conversations with Joe. I think the second question, which again is feeding into our 2025 program now, is the idea of education. That's that's a theme that Joe, we've had a number of conversations with Joe 23 and 24, and that was a theme that Joe brought up a couple of times, that there's a dearth, a complete lack of education on meeting understanding, meeting technology, meeting concepts, and then the interpersonal skills that are needed in order to maximize the benefit of meeting time. So there are two key things, and the education piece, we'll certainly pick that up in our very first episode in 2025. So I really hope our good friends and colleagues who watch us and listen to us might join us for that, because I think with Ruud and with Joe, I'm looking forward to a very interesting conversation about meeting education that people might want to join us on.
Absolutely, Martin. And this is going to be an exciting episode. We are already preparing that, because it's going to be an encounter of two persons that are an ocean apart, right?
Absolutely, literally.
Joe Allen is in Salt Lake. Ruud is in Geneva, in Switzerland. So it's going to be interesting to see this discussion. And obviously, I think the outcome is really to raise awareness about the importance of having proper meeting training, right? So that's something that we are now in the My Meeting Support website. And by the way, this is a novelty, Martin. Besides you being featured there as an expert, for anyone that would like to hire Martin Duffy, by the way, you can go to mymeetingsupport.com. And Barbara McKay have just kindly offered their online training courses that anyone that wants to be educated on meeting management, the real basics, can go there and take the course. It's not that so expensive. And I'm sure out of that conversation that we are going to host on our first episode 2025, there are going to be even more opportunities. I suspect that Ruud has something to offer connected to university level, right? So that was the ambition when we had the conversation with Joe. Why there's no degree on meeting management?
Yeah, absolutely.
But perhaps there's already some offers that universities are offering for you. So stay tuned to the next episode, as you're going to learn more about meeting management education.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when I think back to our first conversation in 24 with Eric de Groot, like two things stood out, Paul. One was the concept of purposeful design of meetings, so that we don't just go into the meetings, thinking, oh, we're just going to meet and we'll just have a conversation. That if we put in purposeful design into what's going to happen, who's going to attend, what the agenda should be, the precise running order, the amount of time given to topics. So that was one major factor that Eric brought our attention to. The other thing I think that Eric raised was that meetings are symptoms of potentially other underlying issues of concern within organizations. And that was a theme that came up with Ruud, it came up with Joe Allen, this idea that the meetings, I like to call them the windows to the soul of the organization. And if organizations, and particularly meeting leaders, see them as that, there's so much more that they can get out of their meetings, rather than just seeing it as an expenditure of people's time. It's a barometer for where the organization is at in its journey to becoming a better organization. So Eric drew our attention to that. I think Penny and Judy in episode 3, when we spoke to them, they brought up a really interesting idea, which was this concept of clean language, if you remember that, Paul. And that the idea of the words that we use during meetings, if we're not having shared understanding of what those words mean, much higher risk that the meetings will go off kilter or go off target, simply because we're passing each other in the language that we're using. So that was a really interesting insight that I'd never really thought about in any great detail, but it was Judy in particular brought our attention to that. The other thing that Penny and Judy brought out for us, as I recall it, Paul, was this idea of sometimes people look for consensus, that we drive towards achieving consensus. But they made the point that driving towards consensus can actually become a form of coercion towards consensus. So, and again, they emphasize this idea that consensus can come in different degrees across places and time. Mm-hmm. So the idea of using meetings not as a singular event, but as you can use a series of meetings to build understanding, shared language, becoming shared consensus rather than driven to consensus. So again, it's this idea that our meetings aren't just singular. They're not just standalone. They actually form a pattern of activities, engagements, and behaviors over time, and thinking about them, designing them from that perspective, as Eric might suggest to us, using them from that perspective, as Penny and Judy might advise us, that brings us to view meetings more as a tool to harness the full potential of the organization, rather than, just another waste of time going to meetings. So it's all of our conversations, Paul, have forced us to think differently about meetings. And I think that's the starting point to getting better value out of our meetings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I was also impressed with June episode with Dan Ram. Martin, do you remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I was so impressed because Dan also mentioned something, Martin, and I would like to tease your views on this, because meetings can also be therapeutic in a way that if you want to bring the best of participants' selves in a meeting, that converts meeting also in a space of healing and therapy, right?
Yeah, and one of the key points that Dan and Bo made to us during that actually was to see the meeting attendees as equal participants rather than as spectators. And just a personal thought that they provoked in my own thinking about it is this idea of technology in meetings. How many meetings have we attended in the last 2 years where half the people attending are looking at their phones and engaging in things that have nothing to do with the meeting that they're at? In other words, they're not present. They're absent for a period of time. And the amount of disconnect that can create, both in the meeting, but then in the wider relationships, that when we leave the meeting, the disrespect that can show to other participants. So they separated this idea of spectators at meetings versus participants at meetings. So if you turned around and said, well, instead of meeting for 2 hours, we're going to meet for 1 hour and there's no phones allowed. And we expect everybody to participate equally. We don't expect people to spectate half time spent thumbing on their phones. That will be an interesting test of an organization's levels of participation as opposed to levels of distraction, engaging technology in meetings that has nothing to do with the meeting event that we're actually taking part in.
Absolutely. But Martin, let me just take what you just said to remind you about the case on a number of meetings I participated. The fact that the participants there, and this the typical sales manager that interrupts the meeting in order to watch the WhatsApp, it's a new cause. That kind of behavior, sometimes that's what the meeting owner expects to happen. So that's the norm, right? Yeah. And this is really not paying attention of the golden opportunity that a physical encounter of human beings can mean for us to go deeper on our understanding of or creating this collective intelligence that should drive us all, right? So that's the missing opportunity when the meeting owner herself or himself do not realize that we have to create some norms of engagement in a meeting, things that we shouldn't be doing. So phones out, something like that, right? So that's the kind of thought that we like to tease from you, because you favor this notion of meetings as the microcosmos of the organizational culture. What's the motto, Martin?
Yeah,
The window to the soul of the
windows
organization,
to
right?
the soul of the organization. They reflect the culture, and so many of our guests over the year touched on that theme in different ways. I think back again to Joe Allen's conversation in episode 7 with us, where Joe talked about meeting habits, and I think that's a key point you've just made there. That if the habit of the chief executive or the chief operations officer or the chief sales officer, if their personal habit is, well, I constantly check and I'm constantly plugged into something outside of what I'm currently doing, if that becomes part of the culture of the organization, if that then becomes part of the culture of our meetings, that forces us back to say, well, okay, those who aren't part of looking at that graph or this chart or whatever, do they become spectators? And is that the best use of their time? And it brings us back to, but why am I here at the meeting? So we can take ourselves full circle on these themes that keep on recurring and recurring in the conversations that we've had. But Adrian Seagar, actually, in episode 4, Paul, Adrian brought us into this interesting concept of the peer conferences idea. Okay, so we stepped away a little bit in some of our episodes from conventional organization meetings, and we took it into the more deliberately pre-planned and separated from the routine meetings. So this idea of peer conferences, when we discussed that with Adrian, fascinating concept, that we bring a group of people together from multiple different organizations, and we don't have an agenda at the start, which in some ways a bit counterintuitive. We're saying, oh, we're meeting, but why are we meeting? But that's the key part, actually. With the peer conference, there is a why is answered before we meet. It's because we have something shared in common with each other. We're there because we're volunteering to be there. So we're bringing our participative selves at the get-go, but we don't know exactly what we're going to be doing, but we know why we're actually there. We don't know what we're going to get out of the peer conference, but we know what we're going to put into the peer conference. So again, Adrian forced us to think a little bit outside the box in how we value the time that we put in, without always demanding an expected outcome. But what he actually said to us was, but there is always a really positive outcome because people are so clear on giving themselves into the peer conference. So again, if that was nurtured, I think, in organizations, if the engagement that people bring to it was harnessed in advance. So again, this idea of rigorous preparation, that was a point I think that Bo Kruger and Dan Ram emphasized for us, that if we prepare really carefully, we can expect to get more as an output than we might have otherwise expected. So less focus on too sharp an output that we're demanding, because that smacks a little bit of forced consensus. Well, I know the output I want. Well, if I just get everybody to align to the output I want, well, then that's sounding like what Penny and Judy cautioned us against. Let's not force consensus. But if we focus at the beginning, why are we meeting there? What are we hoping to bring into as participants into our meeting? We might be pleasantly surprised with the output that we get that may not be what we expected, but could be a whole lot better than what we expected. So again, this idea of using our meetings as possibilities to do or think or be something a little bit different, for me, is always really interesting. And I'm not taking away, Paul, from the idea that organizations need routine meetings. We need our regular catch-up meetings. We need our regular look ahead, the Friday afternoon meeting for looking ahead for the week to come, the regular Monday morning meeting to review, the sales figures for last week, what catch-up do we have to make, what surplus do we make for next week, and so on. I accept those. But we can also create time and space in our meetings for the unexpected, to get more out of them than we might have anticipated in the first instance.
Absolutely, Martin, you are so right there. But I was thinking out loud here while you're speaking, as it's normally very difficult to listen truly to someone, because when you listen truly, you should be focusing on what you are getting from your other participants. So that's something that while you are talking, my mind was already triggering some ideas. And this is something that I think we should educate ourselves to listen first in a conversation, and then to present what we are thinking, because thinking ahead what we're listening, maybe we can lose the momentum here. But I couldn't help while you're talking about thinking on the meeting owner, or so you say the chief executive, that if you ask a chief executive, would you rather have, instead of persons, super clever robots in your organization to accomplish your goals? What would you choose, right? And I think we can create here a continuum on a psychological dimension. I'm just making up right now, but
Sure.
Is that the willingness and the readiness of the chief executive to embrace a team of unexpected, unbehaved, unruled humans, rather than have a team of robots, super clever robots, right? So that's really the challenge. We have to also enjoy the fact that humans are more challenging for our management skills, right? So whenever we have to face a critical meeting, a tough meeting, and you are thinking, oh, I rather have a team of super robots, super clever robots. No, think about that will be even a more interesting challenging for you as a leader, as a manager, right? So embrace a team of humans and try to make it better.
Yeah, and there's a skill to that. There's it seems to me, Paul, that there isn't a huge level of skill in managing the team of robots. So if we have 10 robots in the room, they have been pre-programmed. They can't respond to the unprogrammed. If they haven't been programmed with something, they don't have the capacity to creatively respond to that. So their limitation is what was pre-programmed into them. Even AI has to be taught before it can create, but its creativity is limited to what it was taught. If we switch to the 10 humans, to get the 10 humans to behave in a way that is not robotic requires skill in the hands of the meeting facilitator. And I think that's where our chief executives, where our C-suite executives who host these meetings, not just host the meetings, Paul, but actually set the tone and set the thinking for how the meetings should be viewed. That's where I think there is so much potential to think differently and do stuff differently. For example, Claire and Tamara in our episode 9 with Claire and Tamara, they were giving us a very grounded sense from the executive perspective of meetings. But a key point that they brought up was this idea of the size of the meeting, the number of participants. And I recall we talked around the idea that if the meeting size goes above a certain level, my personal figure for this is about 8. If you have anything more than 8 in a group, the group dynamic starts to change. The way that people interact starts to change. The potential for people to cluster, to have a little group of 2 or 3, is much higher if we have a group of 9 or 10 than if we have a group of 5. You don't get a group of 2 or 3 forming in a group of 5. But 2 or 3 people can have a little sidebar in a group of 9 or 10 because it kind of gets lost in the corner. So Claire and Tamara drew our attention to the idea of meeting design, but from a different perspective to our first episode with Eric. Eric talked about meeting design, but Claire and Tamara were talking about meeting design in a more detailed sense of who's there, why are they there, how many of people are we going to have, and if we get too many, step back and think differently about how the meeting design is now going to need to change. So again, this idea of, I suppose, meeting hosts becoming aware of these dynamics is so beneficial if they can take the time to actually plug in to that type of expertise. Now, quite a bit of that expertise, Paul, has been given free through our episodes because our guests have so generously given of their time to share experiences, learning, knowledge, and so on. So I think there's a wealth of information available in the episodes that we've done. And of course, we've got the possibilities as well of the short summaries that we do at the end of our episodes. If people even just wanted to fast track through to those in an episode, there's so much rich learning to be taken from what our guests have shared with us. I think, executives could benefit from just listening to 2 or 3 of those episodes and hear what those experts have had to say from personal experience. They're
absolutely
they're coming at this having been around the block, as the saying goes, a couple of times.
Absolutely. And you just gave me a great idea, Martin. Besides this conversation we are having, it's going to be live in mid-January. Please follow mymeetingdoctors.com. We have there all the videos that Martin is mentioning are there. But we could do a playlist of our summaries 2024, Martin, if you agree.
Yeah,
and this is a playlist that will be an episode consisting of all the summaries. Yeah. And we can create that for your benefit in the end of January, if you like, as we are going to also have our first episode of 2025 early in February. Yeah. In order to start the year with episode 1 in month 2, and we're going to follow that from now on, as this is actually episode 12 happening in January. But it's a great idea, Martin, because I think you really do these summaries with such a brilliance. I mean, a talent, and I think it's golden nuggets, as I call them, that are available for our viewers to follow. Of course, if you want to engage a little bit more with Martin Duffy himself, you can go to My Meeting Support and book an hour consultation. As you can see from our episodes, Martin is an excellent facilitator. It's a person who has a grasp to encapsulate a conversation in a few points. And that's really important for any executive to have that skill. So if you, as an executive, besides watching our videos, would like also to develop these skills, you can take an online course that Barbara McKay is offering, also on our website. You can go there. Then this is Basic Principles for Meeting Management. And of course, watch our next episode, 2025 first episodes. We're going to talk with experts, meeting experts that are also going to give you opportunities for you to increase your education on meeting management. That's the point. It's not something you can rely on your instinct. Don't think that, I'm excellent at meeting management. You are not. These skills need to be acquired, right, Martin?
They do, and even people who are expert at meetings, there's always something to learn. Like every meeting, there's a practice, Paul, that I like to follow myself at the end of meetings. I call it a PMI, a plus minus interesting. Um, uh, Edward de Bono is the gentleman credited with this idea. It wasn't designed to be used in meetings, but actually, if you use it in meetings, it allows you. It's called plus minus interesting. It's a way to very quickly and succinctly review an event, something that happened, and you spend about 30 seconds to 1 minute just word reviewing, single word or single sentence, no explanation, what was positive during the meet. The second minute is what was minus, what didn't work so well. And the third minute is given to what was interesting about this gathering or this get together. And by doing just 3 minutes, literally 3 minutes at the very end of the meeting, it's possible over time to slowly start hearing and seeing, oh, I wasn't so good at my timekeeping, or I interrupted people more, people felt interrupted, or people didn't feel listened to, because we give ourselves permission to listen back in that 3 minutes to, well, actually, I did some stuff that was really good. I must keep doing that. So we can learn from ourselves. We can learn by doing. We don't always have to go to experts to learn, but just to acquire those initial skills to be able to self-learn. It can help to have a conversation with people like yourself, Paul, and myself, that I suppose do this type of activity fairly routinely, because that's the nature of the work that we like to do.
Absolutely, Martin. And just as you are sharing a tip, I may also share a tip that, for instance, you can also do whenever you are organizing an important meeting, is that create a short survey in advance. Yeah. Asking participants, what are the issues that they would like to address in a meeting? What is it that they would consider to be meeting success? Questions like this. You can look at my blog. There's an article I wrote about the importance of sending upfront surveys in advance. And this can bring you, as the meeting conductor, a wealth of information that could probably point you to the direction of hiring someone external to your organization to conduct that meeting for you, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that if you are not in the mood for doing just right now, for instance, if you have an hour consultation with someone expert like Martin, you could get some coaching on how you could do it yourself, right? Yeah. So that's also another option. All in all, what we want is to have better, successful, more productive meetings worldwide, right? And it's up to you, Chief Executive Officer, you have a role to play on this.
Yeah, 100%, Paul. Couldn't agree more. And again, repeatedly, I think all of our guests in one form or another touched on the idea of why. Why are you having the meeting? And when you've bottomed out the why, you then get into what are you doing to achieve the outcomes that you're trying to achieve? And that brings us into design. And design of the meeting requires understanding of the different possible dynamics in meetings in order to get the maximum output from the level of input that we look to put into it. I think, like our final guest in 2024, who's going to be our one of our first two guests in 2025, Paul Ruud. The conversations, we had two conversations with Ruud that again led one into the other. And the overarching theme was design, event design. So he wasn't specifically speaking about routine, regular organization meetings, but the principles that he was talking about equally apply to any set of meetings or events that we might put together. So again, I think if we go in with an open mind, with an open heart to a conversation such as the ones that we had with Ruud, with Eric de Groot, with Joe Allen, with Rudy and Penny, we have the possibilities to listen to experts, to hear things that are meaningful to us, but we might hear them in a slightly different way. And I think there's such a wealth of expertise and knowledge available in the series of episodes that we've run. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to more engaging and interesting conversations coming into 2025, Paul.
Thank you so much, Martin. And dear viewers, thank you so much for watching, for following, for your comments. And by the way, dear colleagues, if you know some particular chief executive officer that excels in a way she or he performs meetings in our organization, please send it to us. We love to have you on the show. We want to learn from you because, as Martin said, there's always something to learn on meeting management. Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you, dear viewers. And we're going to wrap up now. This one would not have a summary. Maybe I'll take your role on this summary. I'll put the 3 pitches here. So, first of all, dear chief exec, if you have a responsibility in making your meetings in your organization, that's your responsibility. How can you do it? So, first of all, you can watch our episodes from 2024, look at the subjects, and you can find a wealth of practical information that you can extract for yourself, right? Obviously, if you are interested in going a little bit deeper on the technical side, you can buy the courses from Barbara McKay on mymeetingsupport.com. There are 2 wonderful courses, a basic one and a more advanced one. And finally, you can 1-hour consultation with Martin Duffy that also could give you some good clues on how to conduct your meetings, because there's also an organizational impact on every meeting you take, and that's the consideration as a meeting expert like Martin Duffy can give you, as he's packed with a career and knowledge from the Air Force until project management. So an ideal consultant for you to hire if you are having a critical meeting ahead. So that's my summary today, Martin. Apologize.
Not at all, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for your kind words. It's always a pleasure to catch up, Paul, and looking forward to more really interesting conversations into 2025 with our future guests.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martin, and Happy New Year, everybody. Successful
Happy New Year,
for all.
folks. Cheers.
My name is Paul Nunesdea. I'm a certified professional facilitator from the IAF, which stands for International Association of Facilitators. Since 2018, I've started a book series on architecting collaboration, and my latest book, in co-authorship with Martin Duffy and other renowned digital facilitators and guest co-authors, is titled Beyond Virtual Meetings. It's all about the importance of the digital tools that can extend and augment the power of you as a facilitator and a meeting host in virtual online meetings, but also on the hybrid meetings that are going to be so much needed in this post-pandemic era. Along with my co-author Martin Duffy and esteemed PhD colleague, we host Talk to Your Meeting Daughters, a series of hosted conversations with meeting experts that can advise you about how to transition to this new normal and take advantage of this incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make the organization of your meetings more sustainable and effective. Please stand by as the next show will start momentarily.